Welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. I am your host, Cardin Ellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everyone.
And today, the United States of America finally labeled China as a currency manipulator.
Well, I believe it was yesterday, yes.
Yes, you're right. I'm sorry. Within the last 24 hours, I should say. We've labeled China finally as a currency manipulator, and that's the topic du jour. And it actually became the impetus for a video we have long wanted to do about international affairs and Andrew Yang. A lot of people asked in our live stream yesterday, what do you think Andrew Yang's biggest weakness is? And I do believe, along with many members of the Yang gang, that sometimes international affairs and foreign policy can be his weak link, shall we say, which makes sense as a domestic businessman. He's not doing, international barrel of oil trade deals with Saudi Arabia every day. So he may not be as familiar with the Saudis, their culture, or their foreign policy. However, all of a sudden pushed into the forefront is the fact that China has finally been labeled a currency manipulator. And this is something I have been talking about for eons. Totally happy it happened. However, I don't want to be like the DNC and say, hey, Asian looking guy up on the debate stage, let's ask you a question about China during the debates. We actually want to do an in-depth analysis of what is going on and how Andrew Yang has reacted to this, because there's been two interviews since it happened. So, Cody, really fast, give us a crash course in what's going on.
Yeah, well, I thought it'd be kind of fun really quickly to listen to a couple of responses Andrew Yang has had to the question of kind of what we should do about China. Mostly about foreign affairs, not relating to overseas wars in the Middle East, but more generally speaking, countries are not wars we have to deal with. Anyway, here is his answer from the first Democratic debate back in June.
Our greatest geopolitical threat, because they've been hacking our democracy successfully, and they've been laughing their asses off about it for the last couple of years. So we should focus on that before we start worrying about other threats. Now, China, they do pirate our intellectual property. It's a massive problem. But the tariffs and the trade war are just punishing businesses and producers and workers on both sides. I met with a farmer in Iowa who said he spent 6 years building up a buying relationship in China that's now disappeared and gone forever. And the beneficiaries have not been American workers or people in China. It's been Southeast Asia and other producers that have then stepped into the void. So we need to crack down on Chinese malfeasance in the trade relationship, but the tariffs and the trade war are the wrong way to go.
All right, Mayor Buttigieg.
Okay, so Chinese malfeasance, just so you know, is the most euphemistic term for currency manipulation that I've ever heard in my life.
Well, he doesn't actually specifically. We have another answer if you guys want to hear. This is an interview he did with The Hill. Also asked about China. Yeah, he noticed he doesn't actually bring up currency manipulation directly. I don't believe. Could be wrong, but I don't believe.
Get to do business with the Chinese military and the Chinese government and the Yang administration.
Well, one of the things that we have to examine is really the costs and benefits and how serious the threats are from Chinese access to certain pieces of software or information. But the thing I would suggest is that one trap I want us to avoid is thinking that if another country is rising, then we're somehow falling or suffering. That's a zero-sum game mentality that will lead inevitably to greater friction, a Cold War, and potentially even worse.
So how do you view the China threat? Is it a threat?
Well, so there are aspects of Chinese behavior that are deeply problematic. Their piracy of intellectual property, and as you're suggesting, some of the times they have taken advantage of frameworks to their own benefit, and we haven't had some of the same benefits. But China is in the midst of an historic increase in prosperity, and that is not something that America should be threatened by at all.
Okay, so we quote movies on this podcast, and let me quote the usual suspects here.
Okay, that's a good one.
What's the greatest trick that the devil ever pulled off, Cody?
Got a feeling you're going to tell us.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled off was convincing man that he did not exist. Okay?
Is that actually like a religious thing, or is that just from the movie?
No, it's actually from the movie.
Oh, cool.
It's when he was holding the cup, and he says it multiple times. The cop that's interviewing...
I didn't know if it came from somewhere else.
Yeah, that's interviewing Kevin Spacey's character says, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to convince man that he doesn't exist. I'm botching the quote, but that's the spirit of the quote, okay? Americans, especially Generation X, Millennials, and Zennials and Gen Z, really have no understanding of the threat that China is to America, because we have not experienced the immediate effects of that relation. You're saying wow to something. Did you actually look it up and find proof?
Yes. Okay, hold up. This is a great lesson on the internet, guys. If you ever want to claim you know where something originated from, no offense. This happens to me all the time. I'll say, oh, this came from this. Somebody will tell you that actually it was a translation from French from The Generous Gambler, a very short story by Charles Baudelaire that reads something in French. So that's what'll happen. If you ever think you know where something came from, someone will say, actually.
But it shows up in The Usual Suspects, right?
Yeah, that's where that is where everyone would know it from. I'm just saying. Actually, it came from
the greatest trick,
French short story.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. This is exactly what China is doing, and this is how it affects you, and this is what Andrew Yang has to prepare for if he is going to be both commander-in-chief and is going to be able to be the person that's leading the largest economy in the Western Hemisphere, and basically the only other superpower besides China, okay? The greatest trick the devil ever did was convincing people that he did not exist, okay? China gets its economic advantage. And by the way, when you hear the word economic advantage, just think power, because just like time is money, economic advantage is power, full stop. They're absolutely synonymous, and there is no difference. And the way that they get it is by cheating. Now, oftentimes for Americans, we think, oh, well, China has promised to do these environmental things, and they're just going to do it. No, they lie, they cook all their books, everything they do is dishonest. American culture is wildly transparent compared to, I would dare say, any other culture in the world. And it's mostly because of our Puritan work ethic and the leftovers of the societies that had formed us, okay? Both our 40-hour work week and our general trust of each other is a direct result of those Puritans that founded us, okay? Be damned the witch trials. Anyway, they do not report correctly, and they specifically try and devalue their currency so their labor costs less. And why is that important? It seems counterintuitive that a country would specifically try and say, oh, our currency is very weak, it's not worth a lot of money. Why would you do that? Well, you do that so you didn't have to pay your own people as much in order to produce the goods in the factories. And if you can do that for an extended period of time, you're going to slowly amass all of the manufacturing work. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Like all of these jobs that have been outsourced to China? All of these jobs, like Rubbermaid, for example, used to employ 50,000 people throughout the Midwest. What happened? They said, no, it's cheaper to make this stuff in China. So the Chinese came over, they bought the Rubbermaid factories from the American Rubbermaid warehouse and simply just started making them for 40% less in China. Why? Because their labor is 40% less. It shouldn't be.
So, yes, that's been a problem for how many decades now?
About 3 or 4. This has been a problem of 30 or 40 years.
So what?
What do you mean, so what?
So what do we do? Is it just a problem?
Okay, yeah, you have to label them as a currency manipulator.
But it's not permanent.
Okay. No, it can be. No, you're right. It's not permanent, because if they can do it for 50 years and amass the world's manufacturing, then all of a sudden they stop manipulating their currency and they're selling everything for full price, and now they run the world's manufacturing. You can't buy razors made in America anymore except for small boutique companies. You can't buy products made in China. Try and get a power tool that's made in the United States of America. Milwaukee? No, China. Ryobi? China. Black & Decker? China. Go all the way down Home Depot, all those American tools that used to be named after cities. No, they are straight up all made in China. And they're made there because of currency manipulation. And this goes back a while. Everybody laughed at Mitt Romney when he was asked what is America's largest geopolitical threat, and he said Russia. In fact, if you could play the clip really fast, Barack Obama not only made fun of him for saying it was Russia, but then joked about China.
The threat. Because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not Al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because the Cold War has been over for 20 years. But Governor, when it comes to our foreign policy, you seem to want to import the foreign policies of the 1980s, just like the social policies of the 1950s and the economic policies of the 1920s.
Okay, so just pull up the next clip. Here they're making fun of, not Barack Obama. Barack Obama is making fun of Mitt Romney, saying, oh, Russia is our biggest geopolitical threat. And then all of a sudden we're saying Russia hacked our elections. Can't have it both ways.
How do you affect that as commander-in-chief? How do you make China do these things?
Well, number one, on day one, is acknowledging something which everyone knows. They're a currency manipulator. And on that basis, we also go before the WTO and bring an action against them as a currency manipulator. And that allows us to apply selectively tariffs where we believe they are stealing our intellectual property, hacking into our computers, or artificially lowering their prices and killing American jobs. We can't just sit back and let China run all over us. People say, well, you'll start a trade war. There's one going on right now, folks. They're stealing our jobs, and we're going to stand up to China.
Okay, so let's pause and let me dissect this for you. Let's just say me and Cody and you guys, the audience, all owned shoe factories. Mine was in China, Cody's was in Italy, and you guys were in Southern California. All right, and we all manufactured a nice pair of shoes for $5. Okay, but let's just say I manipulate my currency so that I can get the cost of my shoe down to $3. Well, all of a sudden, all the retail outlets are going to want to be buying my shoes at $3. So if they sell them at $5, they're making a $2 profit while you guys haven't made anything. And over a long period of time, what's going to happen is I'm slowly going to amass all of the shoe manufacturing job and all the shoe manufacturing contracts. And then once you two are out of business, I'm going to do what Rockefeller did with Standard Oil. He would buy up other small oil companies just to shut them down so that the price of his oil would go high. So if I've amassed all of the shoe business because I am artificially depressing the cost of my labor, once I've destroyed the competition, I can raise the price back up to $5 a shoe where it's supposed to be when it's not artificially manipulated. And guess what's going to happen? I will run a monopoly on the shoe industry. I will have the economic power of being the only guy in that industry. I will be the giant silverback gorilla in the room. Okay, so is China doing this? Yes, absolutely. The yuan has been depressed systematically and specifically for years so that Chinese companies can intake all of the manufacturing jobs throughout the world, especially in the Western Hemisphere. And American companies cannot compete. And when this is all over, they will have bought up a vast majority of the US dollars. And this is not a conspiracy theory. Right now, they own 30 to 40% of the dollars. And there's a 7-to-1 exchange rate. A 7-to-1 exchange rate. When labor is of equal value and products are uniform, the exchange rate is actually supposed to be 1-to-1, no matter where you go. That's why when you go to Britain, actually Britain's pound is oftentimes a little bit even stronger than the US dollar, but it's still around 1-to-1. If you go to anywhere else, go to Germany, go anywhere else, you exchange your US dollars pretty much for equal value in the rest of the Western developed world because they are not cheating, okay? So when Andrew Yang comes out and he says, yes, they've got malfeasance, it's more than malfeasance. They stole the plans to the F-35. They've stolen so much intellectual property, okay, that they are manufacturing their own versions of the F-150. They have their own Apple stores with their own iPhone 11s coming out before they come out in the United States of America. I got a funny story
about that. Give me 1 second, but hold on. I got a funny story about that.
Okay.
Continue. 1 second. I got to pull it up. But
you got to pull it up? Okay. So recently, 2 or 3 years ago, they unveiled, secretly, not secretly, okay, their own version of the stealth bomber with stolen plans from other countries that are allies of the United States of America. And they do it through, quote, public-private partnerships. If you want to do any deal in China, you want to go build a stadium? Oh, that's great. The Communist Party is going to tell you can't have the land without our permission, and we'd love to do a public-private partnership. Oh, but what you have to do is you have to sign this paper that says we have access to your plans on how to build stadiums and your engineering plans, but don't worry, it's protected by Chinese intellectual property law. We can't steal it as a government. You're protected. Absolute, total, unadulterated lie. They steal everything.
Well, I just pulled this up. Just to kind of show exactly when you say it's not just fighter jets and iPhones. Zelda fans, video game, protest smash PS4 over very similar Chinese game. We scroll further down. Open world game Genshin Impact has been described as an anime Breath of the Wild Zelda game. Some Zelda fans in China are not happy about it at all. The Chinese developed RPG's first gameplay footage was shown recently at the China Joy Gaming Expo. As numerous outlets report, the game has been called out for allegedly copying Breath of the Wild. Here's some screenshots to show how similar everything looks. Things do curse the syllable. Similar. However, I just thought it was interesting that at China Joy, Zelda fans took photos of themselves holding their video game consoles, running the game, flipping off the display at the Sony booth, and they were upset Sony would release such a similar looking game. Idea being that, yes, there's definitely important stuff like fighter jets and, Google technology, but yeah, this is definitely something that you can see in any industry at any point in time where there is problems with intellectual property. The funny thing about this is the holder of the intellectual property for Zelda, the thing that's being ripped off, is Japanese. So it's not just the Chinese aren't just ripping off American intellectual property. They do have intellectual property laws.
Yeah, it's us and all of our allies. I mean, if you rip off the plans for a Japanese fighter, you're ripping off an ally of the United States of America.
How about this, though? Another curious thing. The company publishing this game or allowing the game to run on their system is also Japanese. So take that for what you will.
Seriously.
I mean, they're competitors, obviously, but you have a Japanese company allowing a Chinese company to rip off another Japanese company.
Yeah,
interesting
look,
stuff.
I'm not here to defend Japanese trade principles either. What I'm here to say is the reason why we won. What am I going to weave into this podcast, Cody? World War II.
Found it, man.
I found it.
China and currency, you found it.
The reason I can weave Andrew Yang and World War II into any podcast.
I believe it, man.
But the reason why we won World War II, if we are honest with ourselves, yes, our soldiers were brave. They made the ultimate sacrifice, and they were skilled warriors. Well, we fought more than one country. We had 2 fronts open at once.
Okay, we fought 2 countries.
Okay, we fought more than 2 countries. We fought the Axis powers, which was a conglomerate.
The Italians put up a big fight.
The Italians, the Germans, the Turks, were the Turks part of the Axis?
Ottomans
at that time?
were not fighting with the no.
I
Former
can't
Ottoman
remember.
states were not fighting with the Nazis.
Okay, you're right. But there were other. It was more than just Italy and Germany. Okay, there were smaller countries.
It basically was Germany and Japan functionally.
And at one point, they're actually allied with Russia. Well, we were allied with Russia.
We never fought Russia.
We never fought Russia. It was a Cold War. Anyway, look, the reason why we won World War II against the largest superpower of Western Europe was because for every BF Messerschmitt 109 that managed to shoot down an English Hurricane with an RAF pilot in it, okay, we were building a superior P-51 Mustang. Not just one, but 5 of them, training 5 pilots and putting them in the air. We fought our way out of World War II, yes, but even more than that, we manufactured our way out of World War II. We made more guns, we made more bombs, we made more ammunition, we made more tanks, and we did a better job of all of this. We maintained air and land superiority until we had overwhelming force. And when you lose the ability to do that, even if it's an incremental slide downwards, you no longer have the military might that you have because of loss of economic strength.
Can you tell me where on this map the largest superpower in Western Europe was?
The largest superpower in Western Europe?
The one we defeated. Where are they?
During World War II, it was Germany.
Okay, cool. So they're like part of Canada. A little bit. They take up a little bit of space in Canada.
Oh, yeah, but come on. We all know that landmass.
I'm just saying.
Okay, come on. Landmass. Okay,
Space
Alaska
fits.
Alaska fits. Overlay how big Alaska is on the continental United States of America, and it goes from Iowa all the way to California.
Stronger to my point. All I'm trying to say.
And there's only 600,000 people that live there.
My only point is that China and the United States are of comparable size. Dude, literally space to build factories, if you're talking about a actual conflict, matters. You need space to build them. So I'm just trying to point out that you look at the size of the countries, we're roughly the same size as China. So it's not exactly that simple. I don't think one country is going to vastly outproduce the other. We functionally are pretty close. And one of the interesting things about the U.S. and China thing is throughout history, man, it's not that often you have 2 nations that are as large and similar in size. Same reason why the Cold War happened the way it did. We're basically the same size. We're not that far away if you go the other way. And we're like, okay, we're not going to be able to overwhelm, and the war won't be over by Christmas. You know, like the famous saying, the war we'll fight in the summer and we'll be done by winter. Never works that way. But I'm just saying that I do think it's one of the reasons why I maintain this time and time again. Despite currency manipulation, intellectual property theft, whatever the Chinese are doing, 35 years from now, only one thing behooves the Russian government, the Chinese government, and the U.S. government, and that's that we remain the 3 largest superpowers together.
But
best case
want
scenario.
A bigger market share of the power.
Hey, and if maybe push will come to shove. But I'm just saying, best case scenario that there isn't 1, 2, 4, 5 people at the table. It's us 3 moving forward. And I think people are adults enough. I think the leaders of these 3 countries, as they will change over time, more so in America than the other 2, but still think they'll be adults enough to realize, hey, why don't we just keep everyone else out of the big table and keep it for ourselves, which we have now.
Stalin was adult enough that we got along. Oh, wait, no, so was Khrushchev.
They're both out of power. I'm not talking about the Soviet Union. I'm talking about the nation of Russia. Again, I'm talking about the modern...
Putin. He's the adult in the room. Putin, yeah, all Democrats that are listening to this podcast right now think Putin's a reasonable adult in the room.
He's reasonable enough not to start World War III. You know my source cite for that?
Oh.
He's been probably through not exactly legal means, the leader of that country for quite a long time, and they haven't done anything stupid as far as actually moving military, except for that stuff in Ukraine. That is real stuff. I'm just saying, these 3 countries, U.S., China, Russia, have been huge, powerful, influential countries for decades, and we found a way to not openly blow each other up.
Okay.
Espionage goes both ways, doing it all the time. We found a way to be adult enough to not blow each other up and say, mine. We found a way to say, instead, be selfish enough and say, keep everyone else away from what we have. Now, we can't obviously wrap our arms around each other, but still, it's the best interest that we keep everyone else away from the big table, China, Russia, and America, and we keep it for ourselves, and we're doing it.
I do believe, yes, sure, there is a detente right now. I absolutely believe that. However, Teddy Roosevelt said it the best, that if you want peace, you have to walk and tread lightly, but carry a big stick. And guess what?
All three do.
If you shorten the length of your stick, you can't tread as lightly, and you don't have as much of what Ronald Reagan called peace through strength. All right? It is absolutely, utterly that simple. And Andrew Yang, I believe he gets somewhat. I think he sees how much intellectual property has been stolen, and he's got a grasp and an understanding of the fact that they're cheaters because he's willing to call it malfeasance.
Okay,
he's better than most Democrats.
Spending?
What'd you say?
No one spends more money in the military than the United States of America. Not even China. It's not close.
Yeah, because we're busy defending the world who doesn't pay. If NATO would actually start pitching in.
So you're saying that the United States' stick isn't big enough, even though we spend almost like we spend the most, not by GDP,
yeah,
but we
spend over
money.
3% GDP, and it's excessive.
We have $700 billion a year, dude.
Yeah, we have an excessive military budget.
That's a pretty big stick, man.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's an expensive stick. Maybe not the biggest. It's an expensive stick.
So what? So China's 250 million is just that much billion, by the way, just that much more effective? Those Type 97s are just that much better than the rifles we have? Their jets are that much better where they could spend 1/3?
No, they're not going. They're going to economic war. They're playing it smarter. They're not going to, gun smoke and blood and hot lead war.
They just mess with their currency. They not get deeply hurt by the tariffs. They had to just screw with their currency and get named currency manipulators the first time in 20 years. Like,
go film, dude. I'll tell you this right now. If a stuntman gets hurt in an American set, he's going to get an insurance claim and be on disability the rest of his life and get a payout from that insurance company, and he's going to get taken care of. That does not happen in China. They don't give a crap about human being life. Over there, the expendable commodity is human life because there's just so many of them. They've been that way for 1,000 years. In world history, of the 8 recorded millennia, 7 of the 8 recorded millennia, China has had the largest GDP and the largest economic output. It's only been since the rise of the Enlightenment and Western civilization that Asia has not dominated this game. And you cannot look at how the world has been bettered through the scientific advancements that are direct results of the Enlightenment and the rise of Western civilization. The point is, if we're going to continue with Western civilization, we got to make sure Eastern civilization doesn't overtake us. And I'm not saying we go to war. I'm not an anti-war guy. I'm saying we tread lightly and carry a big stick.
Okay, and that's what America's doing. One.
If a termite is eating my baseball bat and I'm a baseball player, I'm going to exterminate the termites in my baseball bat before I go play.
Oh, who are the termites you're exterminating?
All those little Russian hackers stealing the American intellectual property, and all of the Chinese hackers that are doing the same, and the bureaucrats that are depressing the wages. So anyway, here's the point. The point is, I think Andrew Yang could be and should be more well-versed on foreign affairs and tougher on China. To dismiss China is to fall prey to the greatest trick the devil ever did, convincing you that he didn't exist. That's it. I'm out. What do you got to say, Cody?
Just that I disagree almost entirely. I think China is another adversarial superpower, but I think it's also a country of human beings and people, and they have the very same pitfalls, very same strengths we all have. And like most large countries, they'd probably rather just remain a large, powerful country than go to war and risk it. And I think they're doing that right now. I think that their currency manipulation accusations of the United States are exactly what we're seeing. They're saying, hey, these tariffs are screwing with us more than we thought. Let's try to figure out a way to ease this burden. I mean, we'll work it out. I mean, it's the... How come there was 5 mafia families in New York for years? How come? Why was that? Mafia families. There's no law, no honor.
There's enough market share for all of them.
Oh, wow. Interesting that you would say that. You would concede that point. That's what I have to say.
But they were also killing each other.
All I have to say is if there was 5 mafia families in New York City for a very long time, I understand it's not the greatest analogy because it didn't end well for them. I'm just saying, if 5 mafia families can coexist in a city, I think 3 superpower countries can coexist in the world. That's my point.
Okay, fine. Well, as the enlightened individuals we are that maintain high decorum in our political discourse.
Of all times.
At all times, this is permitted in problem solver politics. Anyway, guys, please let us know what you think. I take the China threat seriously. I view it as one of the biggest threats. I don't think anybody can talk climate change on the left in America without acknowledging that China builds 2 coal factories every single day. We can't shut down ours and build hydroelectric dams and solar panels fast enough, then they can pollute the air. So at some point, whether it's in the name of climate change or whether it's in the name of economic development. I don't care what name it's in, but at some point, an American president is going to have to stand up to China. And if Andrew Yang's going to do it, I think he's got to be a little bit more well-versed and a little bit tougher. That's all I got to say. This is Problem Solver Politics.
Okay, we'll cut.